Hello, and welcome to episode 19 of Squeaky Wheel Productions' Disability Series. Today's topic is genetics and inheritance. What are genetics? How do they work, and why are they important? This video will answer all of these questions and more. Let's get started. Today we're talking about genetics, the study of genes and inheritance, because there are many genetic disorders that cause disabilities. Now, before we begin, we need to define some vocabulary, as today's video will be talking about DNA, chromosomes, and genes in significant detail. DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid, is essentially our genetic code. It is divided into segments called chromosomes. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22 pairs of autosomal chromosomes, and 1 pair of sex chromosomes. Each chromosome is divided into genes, which produce the specific proteins which determine our existing biological traits and characteristics. Pretty straightforward, right? So what is inheritance? Inheritance, or heredity, refers to the specific traits transmitted from parent to offspring. There are 7 main forms of inheritance: autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive, Y-linked, codominant, and mitochondrial. I will spend the next few minutes talking about each of these types of inheritance in brief detail.
We'll start with autosomal dominant inheritance. In this form of inheritance, the gene is carried on an autosomal chromosome, and the genetic trait is carried on a dominant gene. Dominant genes mask recessive genes, and for this reason, only one gene is required for the trait to be inherited. Next is autosomal recessive inheritance. Again, the gene is carried on an autosomal chromosome, but this time the trait is carried on a recessive gene. Therefore, 2 genes are required for the trait to be inherited. However, only one gene is required to become a carrier of that trait. Next is X-linked dominant inheritance. In this case, the gene is carried on the X chromosome, and the trait is carried on a dominant gene. For this reason, only one gene is required for the trait to be inherited in both females and males. It's important to note here that females have 2 X chromosomes, whereas males only have 1, as this will be important later. This brings us to X-linked recessive inheritance. Again, the gene is carried on the X chromosome, but this time the trait is carried on a recessive gene. Therefore, 2 genes are required for the trait to be inherited in females, as the trait will be masked by the healthy X chromosome, but they will still be a carrier. However, only one gene is required for the trait to be inherited in males, since they only have the 1 X chromosome and not a second X chromosome to mask the trait. This brings us to Y-linked inheritance. In Y-linked inheritance, the gene is carried on the Y chromosome. So only one gene is required for the trait to be inherited in males, as males only have 1 Y chromosome. However, only males can inherit the trait, as females do not have a Y chromosome. Next is codominant inheritance. In this type of inheritance, 2 different versions of the gene are expressed. Each version is slightly different, and the trait is determined by both genes. Finally, it's mitochondrial inheritance, also known as maternal inheritance. In this case, the trait is carried on the mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondria are cell structures that convert molecules into energy. The trait is passed on by the mother, which is why it's called maternal inheritance, because only egg cells contribute to mitochondrial DNA.
So why are genetics important? The simplest answer is that genetics help us to better understand human biology and hereditary health conditions. Genetics can be used to trace a family's ancestral history, or to develop treatments and cures for serious health conditions. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty cool to me. Well, that's all for this week. Now I want to hear from you. Did anything in today's video surprise you? Please let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one. And as always, be sure to check out this week's blog and the additional resources below if you would like to learn more. Thanks for watching, and see you next week.